Welcome to the People in Professions podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Shailesh. Join me as I speak to people from varied walks of life, from scientists to street vendors, from engineers to artists, from businessmen to influencers, as I try to uncover how they became what they are and how they are creating growth across industries. This is a podcast about people, their professions, their lives, their struggles, their goals, the opportunities that made them, and so on. The reason for this podcast series is that I believe you can learn a lot from people and the circumstances that drive them. And this information cannot be gained from books or the internet. This can only be learned from people's journeys and their understanding. So you can find the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, our website, and all of these details can be found in our show notes. So join me as I talk to people and help me build this human library. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining People and Professions podcast. My name is Shailesh, and today we are joined by Dr. Lakshmi Krishnan. Dr. Lakshmi Krishnan has been a part of and spearheaded multiple cervical and breast cancer screenings, trying to reach out the last mile in India. She has also headed clinical research at healthcare companies like Niramai, and in a career spanning over 10 years, she has been involved in technology innovation for public health, research, scientific writing. Incidentally, she is a dentist with masters in oral pathology, and now she's completing her second master's, this time in public health from KIT Netherlands. Lakshmi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sailesh. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, which sounds very interesting.
Thank you very much. So, quite a varied career, I must say. So, can you just run us through your career a bit?
Uh, so yes, I'm a dentist, as you mentioned, and I did my master's in oral pathology, where I learned how to deal. I got my basics about oral cancer, if I can say that.
Mhm,
And from there, I moved to IIT Madras, where I was doing a fellowship in healthcare technology innovation. Basically, this was a group of engineers who were doing stuff,
mhm,
products, medical technology, and doctors who needed to use it. So I was this bridge between engineers and doctors. That was my exposure, my first experience and exposure to uh, technology innovation for public health and clinical research.
mhm.
And from there, yes, I moved on to cervical cancer screening and breast cancer screening. And I realized I was in public health and I was doing public health. And I just felt the need to have a formal education and qualification in public health, and which is why I'm now doing my master's in public health after doing public health in work.
That's great. Thank you so much. But I have heard of engineering students or medical students. What is this bridge between engineering and medical? Because many would be interested in this career path.
Yes, so usually universities outside India, in the US and the Europe, the universities are in such a way that both medical and engineering colleges are together. So there
Mhm,
is a learning space where you learn from each other. But in India, we don't have it. We have engineering colleges separately and medical colleges separately, like
mm,
and right now with all the Make in India thing, and honestly too, we are using products that come from outside India.
mm,
Very recently, in last few decades, manufacturing from and for India has begun. And while of course the technology ability to make a product is with engineers,
mm,
but ultimate user is a doctor. So if you just make things but the doctor doesn't find it useful, also because not just the doctor, and I'm talking telling doctors, I also mean the entire health system, and nurses are a very important part of the health system. And at the end, they are the ones who use a lot of devices and products in the absence of doctors. um, it they cannot just use something which is given to them. There needs to be a collaborative effort of identifying the
mm,
need. What exactly do the doctors need, what exactly does the health system need,
mm,
and how it should be made in such a way that they can adapt very easily, because making a technology probably is something the engineers are so good at.
mm,
Again, I say engineering, I'm just using one
mm.
word, but the whole
Yep.
community there.
Mm,
But for it to be adopted in the market and adapted in the system,
mm,
it requires this collaborative effort. And that's what I mean by bridge. because the languages the both communities speak is very different.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that was very nicely put, actually, because we know that doctors do have a technical learning curve. So someone in between who understands both the terminologies is very important. But what sort of careers do you see in this middle age between these two?
Oh, there are so many. Just the fact that we don't know them because they're not termed that. But uh, like I said, with the new, new interest, renewed interest to create technologies in India, and how many health technology companies that we look around, and we know they're doing great jobs. Even we don't have to think very big and say, oh, something that's inserted inside the body, but
Mm,
also something that is outside the body and is used for evaluating whatever is happening. And COVID is a great example to
mm,
explain so many things.
mm,
When COVID came and they were doing the temperature checks, um, uh, nobody knew how
mm,
to do, but it was the engineers who came up with it, and the doctors adapted to it, and the community adapted to it.
mm,
uh, that's just one example that I'm telling you, but there are many such technologies that are coming up, especially with the invent of deep technology for medical sciences, medical imaging especially.
mm.
And because for it to be used in the health system, we will need these kind of people who would understand both sides of the fraternity, so as to say. And if I can add, uh, okay, now I lost the thought actually.
We'll come back to it. I think multiple very good points touched upon. We'll come upon to COVID and the community later. But continuing on your career path, do you think clinical research is one such field that people can look at? And what exactly does clinical research mean?
Okay. uh, Very basically, the drugs, the medicines that we eat today, that we take today for whatever disease that doctor has prescribed us for,
Mm,
has undergone a lot of trial and studies before you safely can consume it.
mm,
And clinical research is that field where, from manufacturing that drug, first time ever, to even inventing the drug, to finally being used by us as an end product, the middle phase,
mm,
from the lab to the market, is clinical research, if I can put it very simply.
mm,
When a drug is developed, and each drug that comes into the market today has probably a 20-year development phase, if I can say,
mm,
um, where it's created and then it's tested on animals, and then there are 4 phases of clinical trial, which I think again people are familiar because of COVID. The vaccination, people knew, were phase 2, phase 3 trials. So it goes through a series of phases of trials before it is finally available in market for safe consumption. So this is clinical research, and people are more familiar with the drug and the vaccine part.
mm,
What is something new and it's coming out is clinical research for devices.
mm,
Uh, the 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 guidelines that we have for clinical research is more so on drugs,
mm,
and we're still yet to come out something for devices where all of us agree upon.
mm,
The stages of clinical trial for drugs, all of us completely agree upon, but devices, there is still this. It's still a new era, if I can say,
mm,
where devices need to be tested on people before its use.
mm,
And with the advent of so many health technology companies and so many bringing out amazing products, I
mm.
think this is very important for people to test how the devices work and for it to be FDA approved or CE approved, you need to have these clinical studies
Mm.
for it to be approved.
Yeah. When you say for the drugs we have a consensus, is it very stringent in India, or do you see a lot of difference between the
Yes.
global? It's not.
It is very stringent. We all
It's
have to
okay.
follow the 4 phases of clinical trial. COVID was an emergency, and which is
Mm,
where all around the world, nobody could finish the fourth, phase of clinical trial because
mm,
it was an emergency. But otherwise, all it's the same. You need to get a drug that's FDA approved and
mm,
uh, CE marked and all of that. Yeah.
mm. So getting the FDA approval and C approval for anyone who's listening who is running a health tech startup or who wants to do it in future, is it a difficult process or is it just a time consuming administrative process?
Oh my God. Okay. I think it is necessary because I
Okay.
think they have set up guidelines, and it is very, very critical, if I can say.
Hmm.
It has its steps, it has its procedures, and I think it's good to follow so many rules and regulations because at the end, the users are live human beings,
Mm,
and we cannot be of course we believe in our science, we believe in our product, and we have that in our heart saying I put all my heart into this
mm,
drug or device, but it needs to be tested, it needs to be evaluated across all the stages for it to reach people.
mm,
So yes, it is difficult, it is time consuming,
mm,
because also at the end the lives, the people who are going to be using it, the lives do matter, it's
mm.
priceless.
Yeah. So, by your definition, I kind of think that there's a lot of medical knowledge required, at least a basic understanding of medical knowledge required to pursue a career in this space. Is that true?
In clinical research, maybe yes, a little of a life sciences background is required.
Hmm.
You don't have to be a doctor for it. You can have a bachelor's in science where
Mm,
you understand something in life sciences. But having said that,
mhm.
I think we are in this amazing generation where you can pivot to any degree that you want and change your course,
Yeah.
because I know engineers who have said, hey, I want to do clinical research, and who have moved
Mm.
into clinical research, so it's definitely possible.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So, when you say someone has pivoted to clinical research, what are the main characteristics of a clinical researcher or a clinical analyst?
Okay, so when I did my first clinical research, I didn't even know that was clinical research.
Mm,
I was in IT Madras, and we were doing this study on cervical cancer,
mm,
uh, different technologies, different methods to screen cervical cancer, detect cervical cancer early.
mm,
And uh, I remember my manager coming and asking me, "What designation do you want?" And I'm like,
mm.
is there a designation for the work I'm doing? What is it even called? I didn't know. I had just finished my oral pathology master's and I
Mm,
stepped out. I was given the term clinical research associate.
mm,
And that's when I was like, oh, so this is clinical research. This is what I'm doing.
mm,
And you could question saying without a degree, how are you doing clinical research? But these are elements that I learned during my masters, and
mm,
which I could easily extrapolate it to the work that I was doing.
mm,
Uh, so that is what I started off with. And
mm,
what are the elements required? I think understanding what a clinical research is and the various stages and phases of a clinical trial, and why does one have to do a clinical trial. It requires a lot of implementation skill,
mhm,
because you're actually going out and coordinating the study. So when I say clinical study, usually you write down a protocol saying this is
mm,
how the study has to be done,
mm,
and everything needs to be on paper saying if A goes wrong, what is the next step? If something else does not happen, what do you do? So you actually envision the whole study, how you do it, and you write it down beforehand
mm,
and say we are going to stick to it.
mm,
And one needs to write such documentation. So if you're good at writing, and if that's where the scientific writing comes of help.
mm, mm,
So you can write such documents. There are also many additional documents that needs to be written, and all of this is submitted to an ethics committee who will
mm,
approve that if you can actually go ahead and do the study.
mhm,
And then you actually go to these study sites, which could be hospitals, which could be institutions, sometimes can also be the community, depends on what you want, where you want to study this population.
mhm,
Then you go and um, talk to the people involved, like who these people are called principal investigators
mm,
and you usually there are doctors of an authority in that place.
mm, mm,
And ideally, you create the whole protocol along with the principal investigator. So you establish those relationships first, and then you work with the hospitals, work with the doctors,
mm,
and establish the study. When I say establish the study, we start following the protocol and make sure everything is as per the protocol, especially if it's a multi-site trial. Now, study in just one part of the country or one part of the world may not be applicable to other parts.
mm,
So you might have to do a multi-country or a multi-site trial where I'm doing a study in Tamil Nadu and the same study is being done in Delhi. You know,
mm, mm,
so you need to ensure that the things are same, the protocols are same in both places.
mm,
And then there's something called a consent form where you use it to take the participants' consent. Anybody, I could go and be a part of a clinical trial, but I need to consent for the clinical trial.
mm,
And once that is done, you follow the procedure of the protocol, take the readings, take the findings, and ideally, you should be discussing, disseminating the results
mm,
to the community. If I have been part of a clinical trial, I have the right to know what the results of the clinical trial are.
mm.
And there are ways to do it. There are publications. You at the end, you publish it. You let the world know what you did, irrespective of whether it turned out good or bad. I think that's very important.
Mm.
So this is what clinical research entails.
Wow, really good. So it's actually sad that most of us don't know about this because we consume a lot of medicines, but we don't know what goes on behind this. And most of us just script saying, "Ah, there's pharmacy companies that do it for money," but there is a lot of procedure and ethics behind this that most of us don't know. Let's come from the start. Who initiates such studies? Is it the company or is it the pharmacy provider?
It's usually a pharmaceutical company
Mm,
because they have produced a drug, and
mm,
they wouldn't just produce a drug just like it. You see an obvious need, like when COVID happened,
mm,
we one of the companies needed to know that they had to produce it. So it could be researchers in a lab,
mm,
it, or it could be a company, whoever's developed first. For it to be made in large uh, amounts, you
mm,
do need a company to do it because it has to be made safely, neatly. It
mm.
has to have its own. You can't do it in the house, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there could be scientists who are working on it. In the case of COVID, there was
Mm,
a lab that was already working on something similar.
mm,
Um, but basically, it comes from the person who's made the uh, drug or the
mm.
vaccine.
So,
When I say person, it could also mean an entity.
mm,
And there's such a drug, and you approach your collaborators and say, okay, this is something that's come up, and can we now test it?
mm. No. So when you say ethics committee, like usually health is a state matter. So do you have different ethics committee for every state, or is it a union one? Or what is an ethics committee?
Usually, okay, ethics committee is a very independent body.
Mm,
Uh, each hospital, especially a teaching research hospital, will have its own ethics committee. But you could have independent ethics committees as well.
mm,
Ethics committees in hospitals are considered. Uh, uh, People often, it's a general perception that people often go to a hospital-based ethics committee because most probably you would be wanting to do your study in that hospital, so you
mhm,
would want uh, get approval from that ethics committee.
mhm,
It usually does not have only doctors.
mhm,
It has people from all walks of field. Shailesh, today you can go be part of an ethics committee. It's completely okay, and because they need a layperson in the ethics committee for it, for the whole study to be seen from a layperson's point of
mm,
view. Because sometimes we are also crazy about our inventions. We fail to
mm,
see whether we're really being ethical about it. So
mm,
there is a lawyer, there could be an engineer, there could be a layperson,
mm,
there could be a social activist, anybody on the ethics committee. Usually, there are certain rules of how many members should be there and what's the sex ratio and
mm,
all of that. And the ethics committee usually meets once in 3 months, 6 months, depends on what the hospital has protocol for it.
mm, mm,
And before they meet, usually such submissions are given for conducting a study.
mm,
And the ethics committee then looks at it. Somebody who's from the study side goes and presents it, and yeah, after there'll be a thorough discussion, and if required, changes can be suggested, saying, no, I don't think this is ethical, you might have to
mm,
change it. You might get feedback like this from the ethics committee, and
mm.
you may, as a study person, may change it and submit it again, and only until you after you get an approval from them that you go ahead and do a study.
So if I have a neurological drug, so let's say I go to NIMHANS and NIMHANS has an ethics committee who approves my drug. Is that the scenario?
Approves a study for the drug.
Approves the study for the drug. Who signs off on the study once the study is done?
When you say when you complete the entire study,
Yes.
everybody who's part, like, so it's not like somebody just signs off on it.
Mm-hmm.
um, every Let's say there are 10 patients who are enrolled for the study.
Mm-hmm.
Each patient's uh, case history will be a very thorough one. If there has been an adverse event, if the drug has been taken and after that something happened or something didn't happen, everything needs to be thoroughly mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the studies that eventually you submit to an FDA, to an authorizing body,
Yep.
and then they look at the studies and
Yeah.
see if there's anything and then they give an approval. So yeah, it's not like a hospital can sign off and say, hey, yeah, you can go
Yeah.
ahead and use the drug.
So once an FDA approves, again, is it approved for that particular state? Because there are multiple studies that happen across states, is it?
Right. So usually when you take an approval, it has to be a multi-site approval.
Mm,
Uh, we can't do a study on one single population and say it works for the entire population. It
mm,
doesn't. It's like stitching one size of shirt and saying everybody can use the shirt. No,
mm,
right. It's as simple as that. And also, um, the way our bodies are different. Our ethnicities are different. So
mm,
which is why some diseases are more common in a certain population and some
mm,
diseases are less common in a certain population. So it cannot be generalized
mm,
until you have done a multi-site study at the same time, and you can't. It has to be, happening at the same time simultaneously.
mm. So we're talking about two different things here. One is the drug study and then drug approval, and then there's the medical devices or medical imaging devices. So you told me initially that there's a lot of difference between these two. So why hasn't there been a proper technique in the medical imaging side or medical devices side yet?
I think because it's also a very new field,
Mm-hmm.
and because the drug guidelines are so specific, so have been so much effort has been put into it. It makes absolute sense for the way it is.
Mm,
But one needs to remember that the drug is always, most often than not, inserted in the body. It goes into your body, so it
mm,
can cause changes.
mm,
But the devices work a little different.
mm.
Uh, Not all devices go inside,
Yeah.
except if it's a valve that's put in,
Mm,
or but otherwise most devices work from outside. Having said that, devices can also have issues. For example, x-rays, the dosage needs to be, it cannot, it should have its own specifications. You
mm.
can't just create um, a device
Yeah. Mm,
whether it causes an effect on somebody or something. Now, this is not easily studyable.
mm.
That's
Yeah.
the word. Not even
Yeah.
sure if it's the word. But yeah, because you can test how a drug works in a body, but the device is something outside. You don't know the effect of it inside the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
So there are certain changes.
Mm. One.
Um, Also, the best form of a study is something called a randomized control trial,
Mm-hmm.
where let's say 20,000 people are, say, called one arm, and 20,000 people, I'm just giving you a number,
Mm-hmm. Mm,
these people are called a second arm.
mm,
And then you give one group, one arm, drug A, the
mm,
other group drug B, and then you see the differences.
mm,
You don't really have to do this in
mm,
a this is my opinion again.
mm,
Because if I'm, let's say we're checking uh, BP
mm,
apparatus,
mm.
it doesn't make sense that I
Yeah.
check on, I can use the same population to
Mm,
check the other BP apparatus as well, because there's
mm,
no change happening in the person. This is one perspective.
mm,
Also, for example, let's say COVID, we had to take tests, no, the PCR tests that were being done,
mm,
RT-PCR. Now
mm,
I take a sample from you,
mm,
and I use something else to take a sample from somebody else. We do not have the
mm,
time to
mm,
evaluate the difference on a device.
collection.
It's
Yeah.
not required. It's, of course, you can do a randomized control trial for that as well, but
Mm,
just takes a lot of time. And these days, I think devices are being invented so
yeah.
quickly
Yeah.
that we need to have some set of regulations
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The protocols are different, and maybe they might come up with a different randomized trial for such devices
Yeah, I don't know.
rather than this. So
Yeah.
that raises a very interesting topic. You told me that multiple companies are coming up with devices every single day. How impactful is startups in this space, and how has the whole ecosystem changed because of health tech startups over the last few years?
I will talk from the Indian context.
Yes, please.
Um, India has a huge population. All of us know we are the most populous country in the world today.
Mm,
But our doctor to patient ratio is very
yeah.
is not as per the guidelines again.
Yeah.
And even all the doctors that we have uh, are concentrated in the urban setup, and I wouldn't blame them
Mm,
because our rural systems are not well established for a doctor to lead a life, as in the doctor will have a family, will have children, the children will need to go to school. So just telling a doctor to go do a rural
mm. Stint. Yeah.
yeah, it's not going to solve the matters.
Mm,
uh, and this is where I see technology playing a huge major role,
mm,
uh, because the doctors cannot go to patients and the
mm.
patients cannot reach the doctors for whatever reasons. Technology is going to play this
Yeah.
middle role where,
Telemedicine, maybe.
yes, telemedicine is one good example.
Mm,
And considering that we have a very skillful population ready to take up tasks,
mm,
this is called task shifting,
mm,
where from the doctor you shift the task to the next person who can do it,
mm,
and from there next person. And eventually if somebody low skilled person can use a device
mm,
to detect or screen or identify
mm,
any early symptoms of any disease and say, hey, I think you need to go visit a doctor.
mm,
Instead of 100 people from a village going to the doctor, if this person picks up two or three people and say, I think you definitely need to go to a doctor,
mm.
it also reduces the burden on the doctor in the city, in the urban setting. So this is where devices play a huge role in our country. And that is, I completely believe that it has to be an innovation-led, technology-based system.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So a hub and spoke model is the only way to handle this. But as you said, a large population, there will be also nuanced problems in India. So any such nuanced problem, India specific problem that you had to break your head on?
I work in cancer screening. My
Mm,
focus has been on breast and cervical cancer screening.
mm,
Definitely, there have been a mix of both success
mm,
and
mm.
challenges.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I think most devices that we initially I did work on
Mm,
needed electricity, but even that has been brilliantly been
mm,
addressed by using solar power.
yeah.
um, the way we work is there's a jugaad. I
Mm,
have worked in camps in rural Kerala where we faced trouble, but we have somehow always managed to
mm,
work across. So I think we have a great mindset of, you
mm.
know, addressing challenges that way.
But do you think it's getting easier to go to rural places now with mobile connectivity, with internet everywhere?
It is probably getting easier.
Mm,
In my rural stint, when I was a dentist, I was working in this place which did not have electricity, and everybody who came to me, even with a simple toothache, I only had to prescribe
mm,
a painkiller and send them back because I couldn't even have a look into their mouth. Now, this is 2006,
mm,
2007. Of
mm,
course, things have changed now.
mm,
I know of tech companies which have developed uh, solutions so that vaccines can be transported, because vaccines
mm,
need to remain in a certain temperature and in a
mm,
certain transported to rural parts of northeast India. So
mm,
things are definitely changing,
mm.
and we seem to be having a solution for everything. And again, COVID is a great example where I see people work, very quickly
Yeah.
to deliver things. So I know places where ship containers, I think that's what
Mm.
they call it, they were converted to hospitals.
Mm.
Uh, Train bogies were converted to hospitals.
Yeah.
So I think we can come up with solutions for every challenge.
Any challenge that you are hopeful to be solved in the next few years, that you think we are on the right path? Any, be it cancer or any specific thing?
Oh, that's. I wish I could say yes, that we are on the right track for things.
Yeah.
Uh, we have been very close to success in eradication of malaria and almost
Mm.
tuberculosis.
Mm.
But India could have been a success story in
Yeah.
actually having eliminating malaria, but mm,
Yeah.
yeah, we've come back to things. So yeah, something like polio, probably you could say it's already gone. So there are certain success stories.
Mm.
Uh, but we have something called sustainable
Mm.
SDG, right?
Yeah.
Sustainable
Yeah.
Development Goals,
Yeah.
and one of them is to not one of them. The goals actually say by
Mm.
2030,
Mm.
uh, we tick off many parameters and we're closer to achieving universal health coverage.
Mm.
But honestly, things our nature of diseases are changing,
Yeah. Yeah.
so we cannot really say, okay, we've tick marked this, it will not come back again. It will come back in a different form. And we saw that in COVID. It kept
Yeah.
coming back.
Yeah.
And with climate change, although everybody thinks it's a very distant thing, it
Mm.
is one of the major reasons for our change in the way health is being perceived, health is being
Mm.
diseases are coming to the forefront.
Mm.
Change does have a huge role to play in it. So, uh, while there are so many factors affecting it, health will
Mm.
always be a problem, unfortunately. I'm sounding very pessimistic about it, but
No, no, this is good. This is good. Most people don't have this much of exposure also. When you're talking about acceptance of healthcare, so coming to one of the stints that you've had in breast cancer, so I used to work on breast cancer also, as you know. And when I talk about breast cancer to people, people just run away from me. Both girls, women, and men also. They used to run away saying that I'm not interested in talking to you, or I'm not comfortable in talking to you with this. You have worked on cervical and breast cancer. How has your experience been, and do you think it's improving the
I think
acceptance?
I I can imagine why people ran away from you. It's also
Thank.
a cultural thing for men to talk about breast. And when I
Mm.
was talking to my male friends about breast cancer, they would want to avoid the word
Yeah,
breast.
exactly.
Uh, so I think one of the first things that I did with my friends is to say, okay, say breast cancer, say
Mm.
breast, say it, because it has breasts are there on half of the population in the world,
Yeah. Mm.
uh, and sadly, breast cancer is only increasing.
Mm.
For anybody with developed breast, and when I tell that men can also get breast cancer,
Exactly.
as
Mm.
recent last week, somebody was like, "Really?"
Mm.
Uh, yeah. So one of the things with cancer is somehow you always think it's a distant disease, that it'll
Yeah.
happen
Yeah.
to my neighbor, my friend, my family, but no, it
Yeah.
won't.
It won't happen to me. Yeah.
I think it comes also from the fear that I don't know how to handle it if it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's and thanks to some old movies which have always shown that you get
Mm.
cancer, you're dying. And even like I said, even as we said last week, people are like, but there's no cure for cancer. Why are you
Yeah.
working on it? I said,
Exactly.
no, there is. If you detect it early, there is cure, and we are working towards detecting it early. So I think
Mm.
the major problem is lack of awareness,
Yep.
and I will use the word cancel literacy here,
Mm.
because we have educated people who do not know what the risk factors for cancer are. And education, I wouldn't say all educated people know about cancer, and I wouldn't say all uneducated people do not know about cancer.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, education, unfortunately, is not a parameter here that you can use
Yes.
to assess.
Yes.
So, that is the social stigma and the
Mm.
lack of awareness and some amount of fear
Mm.
is from the patient part, that okay, this is why they wouldn't go to seek cancer care.
Mm,
But there are also some gaps on the health system side,
mm,
because, like I said, again, it's a large population. You can't go
mm,
see everybody for cancer. And I am right now in the Netherlands, and you get invitation here to
mm.
come go for cancer screening. Now they get an invitation because they know when I turned the right age. And how do they
Mm.
know it? Because the system is in place. uh, and now we are not just talking about the health system, we're talking about governance is in
Yeah,
place. And
yeah,
their governance is in place because it's a smaller population.
yeah.
So I think that way India has her own challenges of a big
Yes,
population and varied population. And yeah.
yes. So, for a normal listener, what do you mean by cancer awareness, and how can I improve it?
So a very dear friend of mine passed away from cancer, and he was my age.
Mm,
And uh, he had the most healthiest habits, eating
mm,
habits,
mm,
had no deleterious habits. So his first
mm.
question to me was,
Why
why
me?
did I get cancer? I
Mm,
don't do anything. I don't drink. I don't smoke.
mm,
And while drinking and smoking definitely are factors
mm,
for increasing your risk, doesn't mean if you're not having it, you will not, because this is a genetic disease at the end of the
mm.
day. Everything under the sun, including the sun, is a risk factor for cancer.
Yeah.
And again, unfortunately, our knowledge has not increased to an extent where we know what is exactly causing it and how do we prevent it.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
can't prevent cancer as such. You can, what max you can do is detect it as soon as it happens.
Mm,
And that's where the trouble with cancer lies. And
yeah.
for example, in cervical cancer, we do know why cervical cancer happens. It's one of those rare cancers where we actually know why somebody is hitting cervical cancer. And when you know the why of it, you can
Mm,
actually work on it. And that's why we have the cervical cancer vaccine,
mm,
because certain kinds of HPV virus,
mm,
human papilloma virus, causes the cancer.
mm,
So we give vaccination for that
mm.
virus. But for example, like breast cancer, it's multifactorial.
Yeah.
There could be many reasons why you get breast cancer, and it's not necessary. You Nobody in the family could have breast cancer, and you could have it. So it is possible. Uh, yeah. So
So we'll come to vaccines, but just to conclude on this, the best that we can say is earlier it's detected, there's a very high chance of curing. Is my understanding correct?
yes, very high chances of
Survival.
survival, of prolonging your life.
Mm,
Also, very a treatment costs are much cheaper when you detect it early.
yeah.
Again, breast cancer has like at least 4 stages.
Mm,
When you detect it at stage one or max
mm,
stage two,
mm,
it's something that can be treated easily.
yeah.
Simply because stage three, stage four, it starts spreading, and once it starts spreading, you don't know where all to take the cancer out from.
Yeah.
In a stage one cancer, it's usually confined to a place, and you can remove it and treat it, and so that it doesn't come. I know patients who have survived for 20 years after breast
Mm,
cancer diagnosis. So it is
mm,
definitely
yeah.
possible. It's
Yeah.
not a death statement. Cancer is no longer a death statement.
Perfect. So all we can say is like educate yourself, and if detected early, even if you find a small lump, please go to the right doctor. Now, coming to the main point that you said, most people, even educated people, think cancer is not curable. But you also talked about cancer vaccines. What does that mean?
So not all cancers have vaccine.
Mm,
We're talking about cervical cancer here, which is the
mm,
second most common cancer in India.
mm,
Uh, it was the most common cancer until 2013.
mm,
But then breast cancer overtook it, and also the incidence of cervical cancer came down.
mm,
Cervical cancer, we know what we know its journey. We know what happens, how because of years of study on the subject, because it was the top killing cancer for many decades.
mm,
um, Enough research has been done, and we know that there are certain viruses which cause this cancer.
mm,
Like how for COVID we could develop a vaccine because we knew which virus was causing it, and the
mm,
vaccine was specific to the virus. The
mm.
same thing for cervical cancer.
Yeah. Mm,
It can now again, taking COVID example, just because you've got a vaccine doesn't mean you will not get COVID.
yeah. Yeah.
So the risk reduces.
Yes.
the extent reduces. So the same thing with cervical cancer. The risk of getting cervical cancer greatly reduces by these vaccines.
Mm.
Unfortunately, they are very expensive.
Yeah.
It's not taken up, but at least not in India.
Mm.
It's not taken up by the health system to provide free vaccination like they did for COVID.
Yeah.
Um, Hopefully, that's some success that I would like to see, because this is
Yeah.
completely 100% preventable vaccine if that happens. So,
Yeah.
if you had to ask me to put all my eggs in one basket, it would
Mm.
probably be cervical
Yeah.
cancer.
Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed. So, I know this has been very serious. I know we will come to Shah Rukh Khan at the end of it, our mutual love for Shah Rukh Khan. But straying slightly away from cancer and the Mordius talks about public health. You are recently started your master's also on public health. Why the interest on public health, and what is public health?
As a doctor, I could sit in a clinic and treat patients, and I did that.
Mm.
But in inside me, I had this feeling that I wanted to do more. I wanted to do something which impacts a larger group of people. Now
Mhm.
that means I had to go into research where, somebody who developed the COVID vaccine has now impacted so many people, right?
Mm.
Something on those lines. And so I
Mm.
wanted to go into research, and that's how I went to clinical research. And from there, when I was doing this, interacting with the public, telling them about what is breast cancer or cervical
Mm.
cancer, or what they should do, it really, I have got my kick out of it, if I can
Mm.
say.
Mm.
And um, just communicating, I think I'm a people's person, and just communicating to them and seeing that it made a difference,
Mm.
uh, kind of pushed me to it. And I realized this has such a great impact,
Mm.
uh, that I could fight a disease alone, or we could sit together and work in making the public health system better,
Mm.
and impact a larger group. Now, again, when I say public health, it's not just Department of Health.
Mm.
It is intertwined with everything else.
Mm.
Health is determined by many social factors:
Mm.
poverty, education, social stigma. Everything
Mm.
plays a role in health. And
Mm.
as a health system, I cannot only tackle breast cancer without affecting others.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think public health is more than just Department of Health. I
Mm.
think all the departments, all the ministries need to come together to focus on public health.
Yeah.
It's not just health, because that's something people think, oh, it's something doctors. Today, I'm doing public health masters, and my
Mm.
colleagues are, of course, doctors, nurses,
Mm.
administrative officers.
Mm.
Name them, and they're there. They're all doing public health because it's a bigger
Correct.
uh, thing.
Yeah, it's a bigger cause. So what do you work on in public health? So what are the career options if anyone's interested in this?
So it's you can work at a grassroots level,
Mhm.
where you are, working on the last mile, talking to people, getting them
Mm.
to even reach the hospitals.
Mm.
In India, we have something called ASHA workers,
Mm.
who are also part of the public health system.
Mm.
And these are not even, they're not doctors.
Mm.
They are social workers from the community who have been selected based on their interest
Mm.
and the fact that they're literate.
Mm.
And they sometimes can reach areas where I cannot reach.
Mm.
So I can say, okay, I'm getting a machine to the village, we'll do this study, but the people need to trust the machine and come to
Yeah.
the primary health center. And they're ASHA workers too. So
Exactly. Yeah.
from there, as a grassroots level worker, or
Mm.
as an implementation where, um, I even tell them that, hey, I'm getting the device to your
Mm.
place. So I'm doing the implementation. But where do I get my orders to do the implementation? I get from a
Mm.
program officer, and that person gets his or her or their guidelines from the people who make policies.
Mm.
So public health starts from policy making till through implementation to the grassroots level.
Yeah. Wonderful. So when you say the grassroots level, India would have its own specific challenges at the grassroots level. What can a normal person do without a policy, or someone who is in IT industry who is free on the weekends? Are there any collaboration techniques that the larger audience can come and help?
Weekends, no, doctors also need to take rest.
But
No,
a
but
part time.
no, but for example, this is not really public health, but I can give an example of health
Mhm.
as such.
Yes.
I did a 1 month observership in Tata Memorial Hospital in Mumbai,
Mm,
and that place is crowded,
mm,
like really crowded. And the people who are manning the doors of each OPD clinic, as to say, were normal volunteers who just come by and say, "Okay, today I will take care."
mm,
And I saw aunties coming there and doing it.
mm,
One of the things that I probably have not told anybody, but I usually take the public transport to go to work in
mm,
Bangalore,
mm,
and there are at least twice I have come across this really low economic group people, a couple actually,
mm,
trying their to find their way to Kidwai.
mm,
They have come from Gulbarga, I think Gulbarga, somewhere North Karnataka, and they want to get to Kidwai.
mm.
Even that was such a task for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure this could be made easy. Why? First of all, okay, it's sad that they have to move from so many hours of journey for a cancer treatment to come to the
Mm,
city. And once you come to Bangalore, Bangalore is not easily
yeah. Yeah.
navigatable.
Correct.
And they're asking the conductor, they're asking the driver. I'm like, I'm sure somebody can help them out. Maybe you could have a kiosk in the railway station every day, and somebody could be sitting there. All cancer patients come here, and we could take them all together. It doesn't have to be something big and novel.
Yeah.
It sometimes has to be very very minimal, but can have a great impact. And once you reach a hospital, unfortunately, too less doctors, so
Yeah.
there is no real time to let the patient think and go through other options, and instead they are hopping from one hospital to another to take the second diagnosis. Now,
Yeah.
if you know Bangalore and if you are educated, you understand all the terms, but
Yeah.
if I have to take a decision for my family member, I don't even know what this means. For me, cancer is a statement, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think if you are educated and if you understand it, there are so many ways you can go about helping people.
Correct. Very
And
beautifully said.
even if you're not educated, I'm sure if you have the intent, you don't need education to tell which bus to take and leave them at Kidwai. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the big things. There are people to handle the big things. It's the small, small things that we all can help on.
Yes.
Small things actually do matter. For example, if there's a consent form, if you can help someone fill the consent
Yes.
form, that means a
Yes.
lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So going away from public health, you also did patient counseling. What is that, and how is the feeling?
So as part of my work, now what you need to understand is not necessary if I'm using a method to detect cancer
Mm,
every time it is cancer.
mm,
The technology that we use for detecting breast or cervical cancer, the tests that I use, they're not always like, even COVID, we knew there were false positives, right?
mm,
That's a possibility even in cancer screening.
mm,
And usually that stage, that phase between, oh, that first test told I'm cancer to the second test saying it is not cancer or
mm,
whatever,
mm,
is a phase of great anxiety.
mm. Yeah.
And they want to know, do I have cancer? And I said, no,
Mm,
there is an abnormality
mm,
which we have to check.
mm.
It most may not be cancer, but there is a possibility. But that does not mean you don't go for the next test, because sometimes there's so much fear you don't go for the second test,
Correct.
and that delays cancer. So I think patient counseling, for me, the part that I did was to talk to them, through them, and even before the test, saying, see, this is a screening test.
Mm,
I think screening, to explain what a screening test is, something that detects cancer early, but does not mean it is cancer. All screening test positives have to go for a diagnostic test, which is the
mm,
final say.
mm.
Um, that's what, speaking to them, giving them strength, and taking them through the whole process until they reach diagnosis was what
Correct.
I was playing the role.
Yeah. So you did your second master's. I remember. I know Lakshmi before, so I was asking her before, like, I want to do a master's, but do you think it's possible to do at this age? There are a lot of commitments. I already have a career behind me, but you took the decision to do a second master's. So why is that, and what are the challenges that you saw while doing this?
I always wanted to do my master's in public health.
Hmm.
Because it started off public health, and then I felt the need for a formal education, because
Mm,
whatever I've learned till now in public health is only based on experience. Till now, whatever I spoke to you was
mm,
only based on my experience and not on a based on a formal education.
mm,
I thought, okay, no, I need to have a formal education. Now, again, it depends. Some people may say my experience is good enough, which is probably true.
mm,
Uh, you don't really need a formal education if you're doing
mm,
great. I just felt the need. I didn't want to regret it later.
mm, mm,
And it's like, okay, before I turn 40,
mm,
I want to do my public health. So here I am. Next year I turn 40, and I'll be done with my public health course by then. But challenges that I faced, of course, everybody was like, "What's wrong with you? Why would you
mm,
leave a well-paying career and take a break and do it?"
mm.
Uh, but again, that really depends on how badly you want it.
Yeah.
And for me, like I said, I did not want to regret it.
Mm,
Of course, you need a great support system. To
yeah.
be alone in a different country and be studying is not easy. I
Yeah.
thought I could. It's an easy thing, but it isn't.
Mm,
Uh, so those were the minor challenges.
mm.
But I would say I've had the luxury of having a great support, which is because of which my challenges seem minimal.
Yeah. More power to you, Lakshmi. More power to you. So, what is the identity, or what is it that you derive from a job, or do you believe in deriving an identity from a job?
Oh, yes, very much. I need to be satisfied at my job, and I can't go work for salary. I know it sounds very uh, whatever the
Cliche.
yeah, I
Mm,
don't really, that's not the way I have looked at work. And you could speak to all my employers, and they will say I never negotiated a salary before I started.
mm,
Uh, because for me, I told them that work was more important. If I'm not happy with the work, no salary can keep me.
mm,
And that, I think, has been my strength, although some people may disagree, saying,
mm,
especially because I'm a woman, that I have to negotiate salary. So if women are listening to this conversation, please
mm,
negotiate for a higher salary. Never go settle for anything less
mm,
uh, than a male counterpart.
mm,
Uh, Having said that, for me, I know I could. There was a time when probably I was earning, but I wasn't happy with what I was doing.
mm,
Uh, and that couldn't keep me going for a long time.
mm.
For me, it has to be something that's exciting. And no, I'm like, I get up in the morning and say, okay, today I'm going to learn this. And thankfully, all the 4 jobs that I've been part of,
Mm,
I have always learned something new at work, and I was looking forward to the learning,
mm.
uh, and probably that kept me going.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talk a lot about communication. So multiple times over this call, you have told about communication with different people with different education or backgrounds. How important is communication in this career or in your career?
I think communication networking is very important everywhere.
Mm,
From my first entry to IIT Madras
mm,
to now where I am, I think somehow random people I've come across random people who said, "Hey, do this and do that," and I've tried my hands and I've gotten into it.
mm,
None of my career path, except for this master's in public health, was planned.
mm. Yeah.
Everything happened
Yeah.
just like that.
Yeah.
And probably I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time and have great mentors teaching me. I have learned from every single mentor of mine.
Yes.
And when you say learning, it's not theoretical knowledge, it's not technical knowledge, but it's the
Mm,
soft skills. Just by seeing my previous CEO talk to people, I'm like, huh, this is how I should be talking.
yeah.
And just spending time with people in power.
Yeah.
And when I say power, of
Authority.
authority,
Mm,
I have learned how they deal with things. And
yeah.
uh, yeah, I can never discount my learnings. And one question that I often get asked is, hey, you're a dentist, how are you talking about breast cancer?
Mm,
And that's because I think I had great mentors who never told me, oh, you're a dentist, don't learn about breast cancer. They always told me, it's okay, pick this up, do something more. And
yeah.
that's how, when nobody stopped me, of course, you have your own self doubts at times. Uh,
Yeah.
and I do get that question a lot, but
Mm,
it's because of great mentors, and I think that's very important. Uh, there are some people who are lucky who will have one mentor all their life.
mm,
Maybe here I have many mentors,
mm,
but and you really look at how they deal with things and you pick up from them. So I think soft skills is something that people do not give importance to. There's always qualification, and I think the way Indian education system is also always focused on your qualification, your marks, but I think
yeah.
soft skills, they
Yeah.
need to be better.
Okay. Very nicely said. When you talked about self doubt, how do you handle it? This is for anyone who has the same self doubt.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have a lot. Not, imposter syndrome. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Yes, there are times I face it,
Mm,
because sometimes I feel, man, this is too good. How did I do it?
mm,
So, um, I think there are phases. I will not
mm,
gloss this over.
mm,
There are times I feel it's really not possible.
mm,
I, 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 I it's never occurred to me that I can't do things.
mm,
I do things, but I'm like, I need to be best at it. So
mm,
my problem has been that I want to be best at what I'm doing.
yeah,
Yeah. So when self doubt comes, it's not about whether I can do things, but is this what I should be doing?
mm,
And sometimes there are just things that fall into place, and you just go with your gut. And
mm,
that's one thing I've realized. You go with your instincts.
mm,
Nothing is a better teacher than instincts,
yeah, yeah.
guide than instinct.
So it's that drive and the self confidence that takes you out of the dark days.
Yeah, and also if you believe what your final path, your final destination, if you're very sure about it, like I said,
Mm,
I'm not here. I'm not doing this for
mm,
a bigger paycheck. Of course, I
mm,
need to be compensated appropriately, but that's not my goal.
mm,
My goal is that I reach out to a larger system, and someday we really hope to see a TB free India or a cervical cancer free India.
yeah.
So that gives the kick. So that probably keeps me going.
So what do you tell to people, many like me, who who have also meandered to different paths or who might not have found the right calling? So what is your take on them, or what is your suggestion to them?
Oh, I don't think I have found my final calling yet, because I also keep thinking there's something more. And the last 1 year away from family has been a year of reflection,
Mhm,
uh, where I'm continuing to ask myself what I really want to achieve. And I've realized that empowering women, either their health or through other means, is what I want to do. So that's probably my goal. Health is
mm,
just means of it, working in
mm,
public health. And I think and our Indian education system, of course, we've been typecast into it, but
mm,
we need to keep exploring. I wish I had this knowledge when I was growing up. I would have interned at so many places, and
mm,
I know the present generation is doing that. So
mm,
when you sample multiple things, you get to know what you want to do. At
mm,
40, I'm doing public health. Probably a younger me would have done a public health degree at a much younger age, because you would have sampled so many things.
yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes the goal is to just find your journey.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be to find a goal.
yeah.
So as long as you're enjoying the journey and having peace of mind, and somebody asked me to define peace of mind recently, and I was
Mm,
struggling. But just the fact that you're content with what you're doing,
mm,
and that you're going, you're on the right track.
yeah.
And I think we need to move away from the fact that, oh, I studied this course, I should
Mm,
only work in this course. I think we're changing that way, but I think we're changing a little late, as a little late in our careers ourselves.
yeah.
I wish the present parents will not typecast their children and say, you become a doctor. No?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, very rightly said. You also do a lot of art. So how has art defined you? How has hobbies defined you?
You ask my parents, and they will say I'm not a person with a lot of patience.
Yeah.
But you look at my art, and I suddenly, for art, I have all the patience in the world.
Mm,
Uh, I cannot explain that difference,
mm,
the reason why it is, but I think each one finds some way to self-reflect, for that reflection to happen.
Mm,
And for me, art, when I'm doing art, my mind goes blank. I'm not thinking about anything.
mm,
Um, that gives me focus, that gives me patience. So
mm,
I think, yeah, that way, I still, again, see, low self-esteem. I struggle to call myself an artist. I'm like, yeah, I paint, but
mm.
artist is a big word, is what I feel. But somebody told me recently, no, you're an artist. You should call yourself an artist. But for somebody, it could be singing. For somebody, it could be running. But whatever gives you your me time, I think
Yeah.
it's very important.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the takeaway from this. The me time is very important no matter what you're doing, where you're doing, at what age you're doing it.
Yeah, you could sit in your loo and have your me time, but you need your me
Yeah,
time.
you need a me time. So, Dr. Lakshmi Krishnan, thank you so much. Thank you so much for trusting your time with me, and thank you for this call. This has definitely been very helpful. One last thing for anyone who's listening, I will share Dr. Lakshmi Krishnan's LinkedIn on the show notes. If anyone's interested in all the parts that we discussed, or anyone interested in any of the questions, or anyone wants to talk to Lakshmi on this, please feel free to reach out to her. Dr. Lakshmi, thank you so much for your time. It has been a great pleasure. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you're interested in anything that we discussed, or if you just want to connect with the guest, you can find the LinkedIn link in the show notes. Let me know what you think of this podcast. And please feel free to send me the details of people you know whose life and career trajectory can teach us something. I will meet you in the next episode. Until then, I'm your host Shailesh, and this has been the People in Professions podcast, aiming to build a human library.